Hey Facebook fam, Manar Mohawish here, founder and editor-in-chief of Mint Press News. Thank you guys for joining me again tonight. I appreciate you spending your Wednesday evening with me. So last week we had a very important discussion about the Israeli lobby groups that were behind pressuring CNN and Temple University to basically fire and get rid of Mark Lamont Hill for his comments and for his speech at the UN calling out Israeli apartheid and occupation and bringing attention to the humanitarian crisis there and bringing attention to Palestinian human rights. And so I wanted to continue this conversation about Palestine. I still have my Palestinian kufiya sitting here so that we can continue to talk about Palestine. And so I hope that you guys will continue to join me. If you will, please go ahead and share this video, this live stream, and hit like. We are really working hard to break through the Facebook algorithms of censorship and suppression, and it has hit us really, really hard. And so if you're watching this now, please do so. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to continue to talk about Palestine and Israel, except this time we're going to break down a few candidates who have been voted in, who've been elected in, who are so-called progressives. And this is a really touchy subject. Every time I bring this up, I swear there becomes like a big yelling match about this person or that person. People tend to make a lot of excuses for elected officials. So today we are going to break down, where do Alexandria Ocasia Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar, the new progressive woman, stand on Israel and Palestine and BDS? Where were they before the election, before they got voted in and elected in, and where they are now? And so we have an article right now on Mint Press News. If you can go ahead and check it out, you can follow along with some of the stuff that I'll be talking about. It's on our website. It was written by Whitney Webb. She breaks down the stances by these elected officials on Israel and Palestine. So it's a very important topic to talk about now. The reason why we talk a lot about Palestine and Israel is because it's a major human rights issue that should be the center conversation, a center conversation, one of the conversations about war that all of our elected officials should be talking about, not just because they're Palestinian or because of the landscape or anything like that. It's because Palestine and Israel is something that represents the military war machine that our economy is driven by. And so that's why it's extremely important that we test our candidates on where they stand when it comes to supporting apartheid in Israel, whether they whitewash Israeli war crimes or not, if they talk about a one-state solution, a two-state solution, whether they support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which is a nonviolent movement. And so we're going to break that down today on where these candidates stand. And I'm going to begin talking about Ilhan Omar, who has recently been smeared by pro-Israel groups, including the ADL. They went really, really hard after her, calling her anti-Semitic, because she came out recently and stated that she would never, ever, ever prevent anybody in the state of Minnesota or elsewhere or she would never prevent anyone from supporting BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. And so BDS is obviously a nonviolent movement. It's an economic sanctions nonviolent movement to put pressure on Israel to end its apartheid regime. And so she was smeared for clarifying her stance and standing by her support for the BDS movement. And if you actually look at what she stated before she was elected, she said something similar, but slightly different. And so we want to be honest and talk about what exactly she said. Before Ilhan Omar was elected, she said that she did not support the BDS movement herself personally, but would never prevent anyone. She would never, pass a law. She would never support any sort of legislation that would prevent people from supporting BDS. Before she was elected, she called Israel an apartheid regime. And she is still calling Israel an apartheid regime. So I just want to give her like a round of applause. I think all of us should stand strong in our support for Ilhan Omar for taking that stance against apartheid in Israel and calling also on a one-state solution, which is a really, 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 really big deal. The reason why groups like the ADL and other pro-Israel lobby groups and even the state of Israel want you to support a two-state solution is because supporting a two-state solution would mean that you would support Israel's annexation of Palestinian land. Israel has already annexed. I believe it's over 75% of Palestinian land, if not more. And I could be wrong about that, but I believe it's actually much higher. They've annexed more than 75% of Palestinian land. So supporting a two-state solution would mean that you're supporting an Israeli state that is already taking over the majority of Palestinian land. And you'd be supporting a Palestinian state the size of a pea in comparison to what Israel would be owning. And the reason why a two-state solution is not viable is, again, it would be supporting apartheid in Israel. It would support discrimination, and it would never, ever, ever support, if Israel gets its own state and Palestinians get their own state, then Israel will never be held accountable for its crimes, for its annexation, for its colonialism, for its apartheid against Palestinians. So I think this is a really, really big deal that Ilhan Omar has taken this stance. I applaud her and I support her for that stance. And I think you should too. And so let's move on to the next candidate. We have, I want to talk about Alexandria Ocasia Cortez before I talk about Rashida Tlaib. Every time I talk about Alexandria, I'm just going to call her Ocasio-Cortez because her name is very, very long. Every time I talk about, or maybe I'll call her Alexandria. Every time I talk about Alexandria, people get really, really sensitive when I talk about her because she is praised left and right. I mean, all over the media, especially within, leftist media, as this new wave progressive. She's the new Bernie Sanders. She's going to make waves. And while there are a lot of good things that she is supporting, I think we really, really need to be hesitant about her. And the reason is because of how she flip-flopped on Palestine. And so here's how she did it. Before, when she was running, she tweeted out and called Israel. She called out Israel for its colonialism and occupation of Palestine. And she called what Israel is doing in Gaza, its blockade, its consistent bombing of Gaza, breaking it down to rubble, leaving the people there starving, basically left there to drink water that's made up of sewage. She called that a massacre. And that's great. And that's something that I think all of our elected officials should be calling what Israel is doing in Gaza. It is a total massacre. They're committing genocide in Gaza. We are witnessing the wiping out of an entire population. Over 2 million people are basically stuck in this open air prison. And so she was correct to call it a massacre. And she was correct to call Israel an occupational force. But then she did an interview within the corporate media, and it's linked in this article. And Alexandria went on to backtrack on her comments and say that, Israel, that she doesn't really know much about Israel, and that her comment about Israel committing a massacre was actually when she was speaking more of as an activist than a politician. And so now that she's a politician, she said that she actually doesn't feel comfortable talking about that conflict and doesn't really know much about the geography. And when I watched that interview, my jaw just dropped. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised at this point because I've watched politicians do this so often. But I witnessed somebody go from having a soul, a heart, and recognizing the massacre. And she, even in her tweet, she actually called on Democrats to recognize what was taking place and to find the moral courage to recognize that Israel was committing massacres in Gaza. And here she was losing her moral courage. I don't know why she's losing it. I don't know where it went, but she lost it and she completely flipped on Israel and Palestine. And during that interview, I believe it was on PBS, and it's linked into this article. She went on to say that she, can't really discuss Israel and Palestine. And when asked about the occupation, she said that, she's just referring to the Israeli settlements, and that's about it. So she completely backtracked from that. And then when it comes to the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement, when it comes to the nonviolent movement against Israel, putting economic pressure on the state of Israel, Alexandria has stayed completely silent about it. She has not made any comments. Her campaign has not made any comments about supporting BDS or not. But she has come out to say, and she said it in that interview, that she supports a two-state solution. And when somebody says they support a two-state solution, it goes right back into supporting Israeli occupation, apartheid, and the annexation of Palestinian land. And so that is a really, really, really big red flag for those following the conflict in Israel and Palestine. When somebody says, I support a two-state solution, that's exactly what they are supporting. It's the annexation of Palestinian land. It's the colonialism. It's the oppression of Palestinians in that land. And so that's what Alexandria Ocasia Cortez is supporting. Sorry to break it to you guys. I know she's like this, goddess within the progressive movement, but we, as a people, as Americans, we have to be more critical and not say, well, that's just a single issue that, maybe I don't agree with her on, but I'm still going to support her. No, one person suffering in the world should matter to all of us. And it's not just one person suffering in the world that she's not caring for. It's literally millions of people that are dying, that are suffering because of our military support for apartheid in Israel. And so I didn't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I guess I am for today. And I hope that we can all find the moral courage within ourselves to support candidates, if you still believe in the system that things are going to change and get better, to support candidates that are truly for peace and inclusion for all people around the world, no matter who and where they are. And so I just broke down Ilhan Omar's stance when it comes to BDS, a one-state solution, and on Israeli apartheid. I just broke down Alexandria Ocasia Cortez's stance on Israel-Palestine occupation, apartheid, and a one- and two-state solution. And next, we are going to talk about Rashida Tlaib and her stance when it comes to the BDS movement, if she supports a one-state solution or a two-state solution, and if, what exactly is her stance on the conflict. And I think it's really interesting to talk about her because she actually is Palestinian. She's a Palestinian American. Her parents are born and raised in Palestine. They're immigrants in America. And she, when she actually won the election, she was wearing a Palestinian thobe, the traditional Palestinian dress worn by indigenous Palestinians. And she says she is going to make sure that she gets Palestine to the attention of Congress and make sure that Palestinian rights are heard. And so I definitely applaud her for that. And I hope that you do too. And so before she was elected, she said that she supports a one-state solution, which is tremendous. But she also said that she would support a two-state solution if it was possible. And, that concerns me a little bit, but she didn't really backtrack on supporting the one-state solution. So I think we should be conscious of what she said and remember that, and start following, the actions that she takes moving forward. She's also the second person now, apart from Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib is now the second member of Congress to support the BDS movement. This is huge, considering that BDS, the act of boycotting Israel, is now illegal in so many states across the United States. We have Students for Justice and Peace in Palestine on campuses, student groups, businesses who are up against this system, this legality that, it's illegal basically to support boycotting Israel. It's a huge breach on our First Amendment rights. It's extremely disappointing, but it's no surprise. The Israeli lobby, the state of Israel, has so much influence on our elected officials. They're paid for by Israel. You have to kind of go through like a passage, to become a member of Congress and to run for elected office. You have to kind of go through the purity test, like, do you support Israel or not? And I'm still in shock that Rashida and Ilhan Omar have made it thus far. Yes, they have been smeared so far, but the Israeli lobby in itself is weakening in the United States. Sure, it can buy out as many politicians as they want, but we the people are becoming more aware of what's happening in occupied Palestine. Thanks to independent and alternative media and grassroots movements, people are starting to understand and see the truth about what's happening in Palestine. And they're starting to realize that our elected officials don't truly represent us. They're representing the state of Israel and other foreign governments and other interests that suit the military-industrial complex. And so I'm going to applaud Rashida for supporting a one-state solution. She's also supporting the BDS movement. This is a really, really, really big deal. We should lend her our support, because if you support BDS, especially now, considering they're trying, other elected officials are trying to make it illegal across many other states. It takes a lot of moral courage to do that, because you are up against a Goliath of special interest groups who are going to try to smear you. We're going to try to attack you. We're going to try to create a character assassination against you to bring you down. And so although it's been, a couple weeks or so, they are surviving, the smears that they've experienced thus far. And since Rashida has been elected, so she has said that she has reiterated that she supports the BDS movement. She has reiterated that she supports a one-state solution, and she would still support a two-state solution if it was viably possible. So just keep that in mind. The other thing that's happening right now that's really, really interesting with Rashida is that she's organizing a trip to Palestine, to occupied Palestine. Normally what happens is AIPAC, the American Israel Affairs Committee, they take newly elected congresswomen and men, and they take them on a paid, luxurious, paid-for trip to Israel. It's basically taking them to Israeli cities and areas. They are not exposed. Our elected officials are never exposed to the true horrors of apartheid and what's happening in the occupied Palestinian territories. And so Rashida has refused to go on that trip. She's boycotting the trip. Now, Alexandria Ocasia Cortez is not going on that trip as well, and which is good, but she has not released a statement or said anything about why she's not going to be going on that trip. So I think just keep your eyes open to that, keep your ears and eyes open, and try to kind of read between the lines of where these people take these stances from. So Rashida is organizing this trip, which is tremendous. This is a big deal. It's the first in US history where congressmen and women are going to be going on a trip to occupied Palestine. They're going to be going to the West Bank. She wants to bring attention. She actually released a statement saying, I want this trip to help Americans understand the occupation, the checkpoints. I believe she said something about the people's access to clean water and their land theft, their identity, their religious culture and identity, and so forth. So this is a pretty big deal, and I applaud Rashida for doing that. And so I just wanted to do that very quickly. I think that was a good 15-minute breakdown of where these three ladies stand. And I would like to take some questions and comments from you guys. If you guys enjoyed this conversation, if you guys enjoy our coverage at Mint Press News, I just want to remind everybody that we have a current standing fundraising campaign that we launched a few weeks ago. I think we're just about 50% way through. We're halfway through. We're on day 30 now. And we are just, I'm overwhelmed by the support that you guys have provided us and supporting us and campaigning for us and sharing our campaign, and the financial support that you guys have contributed to. So please, 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 if you guys support the work that we're doing, please consider donating to our campaign and supporting us. We have Facebook, Google, Twitter, Instagram. We have the Israeli lobby and special interest groups and so many other organizations that want to silence us. We've been put like on this hit list by Saudi Arabia. Mint Press was put on a list by Saudi Arabia saying that they are vowing to make sure that they control the coverage about what's happening in Yemen, because we cover Yemen. So please consider supporting us today before they wipe us off the map. No joke, we are being serious. Please consider supporting us. So I'm going to take questions now. And let's see here, I got to get my notifications open. All right, so if you guys can just take a moment to leave questions or comments in the comment section, obviously. I would love to hear from you guys what you have to say. Let's see here. So we've got some free Palestine. Yeah, hashtag, that's right, free Palestine. And let's see here. Okay, so someone's asking about BDS. You know, it's a small step, but is it effective? And so I'm just going to start by talking about BDS. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement is the reason why South African apartheid was completely dismantled. And it will not take, violence is not the answer for dismantling any sort of war. We have to take a non-violent, peaceful approach to dismantling the apartheid state. The apartheid state is extremely violent, it's racist, it's colonialist, it's made up and founded and funded by a military machine that knows nothing more than death and destruction. And so the only way to dismantle that is not to respond with death and destruction, but to respond with a nonviolent, peaceful movement, because that's what Palestinians want and support. And so with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, you are putting economic pressure on the state of Israel and to dismantle and to end its apartheid and occupation of Palestinians and Palestinian land. And so obviously hurting Israel's economy is a very, very big deal. Like most countries, an economy is very, very important to sustain itself. And if Israel's economy is hurt, then its apartheid regime is going to get hurt. And so that's why the BDS movement is really, really important to support. And how you can do that is, I believe there's like BDS.com or BDS.org, it's a website dedicated to the BDS movement. It goes through what BDS is, and it actually looks at, it lists down all of the companies that do business with Israel, that contribute financially to the apartheid regime and state. And you can look it up, all of those companies, and you can see if you buy from them, if you are, it's like really simple things like Coca-Cola, McDonald's. I know Airbnb was on that list, but guess what? Because of BDS, because of the pressure of BDS, Airbnb has now left occupied Palestinian homes and is no longer doing business in Israel. So because of that pressure, we can get American companies, European companies, international companies from doing business in Israel. And so we need to do that. I'll tell you right now that the New York Times, and I mentioned this in our last live stream, the New York Times Bureau is they basically, to build the bureau for the New York Times in Israel, the bureau ethnically cleansed literally a Palestinian family out of their home so that they can build the bureau for the New York Times. So you better believe that you should be boycotting the New York Times. BuzzFeed announced, I think it was 2 years ago, that they are the official mouthpiece for the Israeli Defense Forces, for the IDF. I mean, listen to what I just said. BuzzFeed is the official mouthpiece for the IDF. You can Google this and look this up. We should be boycotting news organization. I'm not going to call it a journalism organization, a news organization like BuzzFeed, who is representing the IDF and making sure that they are a PR mouthpiece for the IDF. Meaning, you better believe that you're not going to get real news when it comes to Israel and Palestine from BuzzFeed, because they're going to be propagating the military occupation there. So I, as an independent journalist, as an editor of Mint Press News, we're an independent media organization. I support, obviously supporting independent media organizations versus corporate media organizations that are supposed to be holding the war establishment accountable, but in fact, they're not. They're representing them. And that's what the New York Times and BuzzFeed are doing. So we have to be really conscious about those little things that we do when we click on their website, when we, read their articles and so forth. So, all right. So let's see here. My messages are a little laggy. So let me see what I have here. I have a couple more questions that I'd like to answer. Okay. So people are asking, what is the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism? And so if you look at some of the tweets that Ilhan Omar tweeted out, she said, criticizing the apartheid regime and calling out Israeli occupation and ethnic cleansing and human rights abuses is not anti-Semitism. Mark Lamont Hill, who was fired from CNN a couple of weeks ago for his speech at the UN, said the same thing. He said, you know, calling out Israeli occupation and apartheid is not anti-Semitism. It is not hating on Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is defined as, discrimination, saying things that are not okay about Jewish people. Whereas anti-Zionism is speaking out against the political ideology behind the state of Israel. Two very, very, very separate things. And Israel was founded not actually on the idea of being a, believe it or not, being, a holy Jewish state. It was actually founded on the idea and the premise of this political ideology, of this ethnocentric political ideology of being a solely European/white Jewish state on the land of Palestine, despite there being Palestinians living on that land already. And that's what the political ideology is behind anti-Zionism. And a lot of Jews around the world actually opposed the idea of Zionism because many rabbis came out, in fact, hundreds of rabbis have come out even during that time and said that in our books it says that that land does not belong to us and that we actually are not supposed to go to that land. And so anti-Semitism is the discrimination against Jewish people. And so Israel and Israeli officials and our media and people on the right tend to kind of play around with anti-Semitism and use anti-Semitism as like the silencing campaign, this silencing tactic, this character assassination against anybody who criticizes apartheid policies. Now, if you're criticizing apartheid policies, that has nothing to do with Judaism. Judaism in itself is a very beautiful religion that promotes peace and prosperity between all faiths and all people around the world. What happened with the people that created the state of Israel is they hijacked the whole idea of Judaism to create this ethnocentric state. And so I hope that makes sense. And so whenever people try to criticize Israeli apartheid, these leaders within the Zionist movement try to kind of put you on the defense, like you're being anti-Semitic, you're being hateful towards Jewish people. When in fact, the majority of people who are speaking up against Israel's apartheid policies are in fact Jewish, because they look at their own books and say that, hey, Judaism is not calling on us to steal people's land and kill them and promote apartheid and occupation in our religion. Our religion doesn't teach that, which is true. And so the state of Israel basically hijacked the religious ideology of Judaism to promote this colonialist state. And that's what Israel is, an ethnocentric, white, nationalist political movement. Has nothing to do with religion. However, religion is used to pull people in to support its political ideology. And that's a pretty, pretty standard process in all colonialist movements. If you think of what happened in South America with, so many natives being killed and massacred in the name of Christianity. Christianity doesn't teach the killing and massacring of native people or any people of that matter, but it was to build an empire, to expand colonial power. But religion was used by the powers that be to pull people in, to suck people in. Same thing with countries like Saudi Arabia, who use Islam, to pull Muslims into supporting their atrocious human rights abuses and their monarchy. Everything that they do is like completely antithesis to what Islam teaches. yet they, stand there as we're Muslim, and you have to support us because we're Muslim and we're the holy, occupiers or whatever of of Mecca and Medina. So it's just politics and empire in disguise, and that's what it really comes down to. All right, so Kevin Mahone is asking, nothing hurts a country more than depriving their economy. Why do you think America uses sanctions on countries it doesn't like? Obviously to destroy their economies. BDS is like a sanction light. And absolutely, that is so true, Kevin. We can sanction countries that don't harm us and that are not doing any harm, like Venezuela, like Iran, like Russia, like Syria, and other countries that have stood up to American imperialism and corporatocracy and colonialism in their countries. Yet a country like Saudi Arabia or Israel, which, there's BDS movements against both of those countries, for their human rights abuses, it's like illegal to support BDS in certain states against them, even though they are committing atrocious human rights abuses and human rights crimes. And it's because our economy, our military industrial complex is supporting them and is benefiting from their human rights abuses. So it's definitely an ironic thing, although that's how empires work. And so we've got one more question here. Lots of comments. I don't know if you guys want me to read comments. I know you guys can read the comments, so maybe I don't have to. We're getting a lot more comments than we are questions. So if you want to leave a question, please do so. I have about 5 more minutes to answer any questions, but I'm gonna answer something here from John Gold. Can you talk about the way the Israeli government treats Orthodox Jews that are protesting against Israeli policy and Zionism? And so there is as I mentioned a little bit ago, the people that are protesting Israeli apartheid and occupation are mostly Jews. We never hear about them because they're silenced by the media. They're silenced by Israeli rights group or Israeli lobby groups. Yet in Israel, in Palestine, there are a group of Jews they're Orthodox Jews who refuse to join the military. They are 100% dedicated to the Palestinian cause. And historically, these Jewish people, I forgot what they're called, and the Naturai Kara, I forgot the name. If somebody can put a comment of their name, I would Google it, but I'm doing live right now, so I can't really do that. It's like Naturai Karai group, and they're a Jewish Orthodox group who their roots to Palestine actually date generations. And so these people watched the state of Israel become into fruition. They watched the creation of Israel, and they're Orthodox Jews. They follow the Torah and their books to the T, and they hate the apartheid regime. They hate the occupation, and they are 100% in full support of Palestine. They're in support of Palestinian human rights, and they refuse to recognize the state of Israel. They are regularly abused, they're spied on, they're interrogated, they're arrested. The Israeli army is very violent towards them. They call them, the anti-Jews, even though they're Jewish themselves. And so it's really sad how these people are treated. And, I just want to make a note about the fact that they have lived there for generations. The land of Israel and Palestine, historically, all 3 religions, and I mentioned this in the last live stream, all 3 religions have historically lived there side by side peacefully. Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and Arabs that have been Christian, Muslims, and Jews. They have always lived there side by side peacefully with no issues. What has happened throughout history, though, is that the Ottomans have come to conquer, the British have come to conquer, the Romans have come to conquer, whatever, empire, the British, whatever group that is in charge at that time is going to come in and support certain religious groups or whatever to get what they want. It's all divide and conquer. And right now, that's what's taking place in Palestine right now. And that's why having a united one-state solution where everybody, whether you're Muslim, Christian, or Jew, having the same equal rights is so threatening to the state of Israel and the military-industrial complex, because it threatens peace. It threatens the war machine. It allows for peace, excuse me. And so, and peace is not profitable. And so that's why a two-state solution is promoted and not a one-state solution. So I'm going to take one more question if anybody has any. I see a lot of comments, so I appreciate that. But if you guys have any questions, I would appreciate that so that we can kind of wrap up here. A lot of religious discussions here. This was not meant to be a religious discussion. This was meant to bring attention to our elected officials that and what their stances are on BDS, one or two state solution, and Israel and Palestine in general. And so if you can, please share this video. I feel like I really went through each candidate pretty well, pretty thoroughly. And the article is in the comments. You can check it out. You can follow the conversation. We are going to upload this video on YouTube as well, so you can follow it there. And you guys can follow me on Twitter, on Facebook. And again, if you enjoyed this conversation, if you support the work that we do at Mint Press, please consider donating to our cause. We're just a few $1,000s away from our goal, and we're only halfway through. So pretty impressive. And it's extremely humbling to see how much support that we have received from you guys, our readers and our fans and our supporters. We love you guys so much. You guys are the reason why we continue to do what we do. And so thank you so much for all of your support. We still have 1 month left for our campaign, about 30 days left. We've already raised over $20,000, which is amazing. We still need to raise about $4,500 more in the next 30 days. And if everybody watching this donated like 10 bucks, we would like be halfway there. So please help us if you can. Our survival against this social media purge that's taking place depends on your support. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll wrap it up for today. Have a good night.